What if I told you there's something even more powerful than silence, something deeper than walking away, something stronger than disappearing? Because silence can protect your dignity, but it can't always protect your presence. And when silence turns into distance, some people stop missing you, they start forgetting you. That's the moment most men lose their power. You see, silence is a weapon, but a weapon in untrained hands can be just as dangerous to the one who wields it. Silence can earn respect or create confusion. It can make her wonder or make her move on. So today, we go deeper, beyond silence, into something far more precise, far more stoic. A strategy that doesn't just make them question your absence, it makes them feel your presence, even when you're gone. This isn't about ego. It's not about revenge. It's about power through purpose, control through clarity. You're not just being quiet anymore. You're becoming unforgettable. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you'll understand a truth that changes everything. Why the man who masters controlled visibility doesn't chase attention, he commands it. Welcome to Stoic Truth 101, where silence evolves into strategy, and self-mastery becomes your greatest weapon. They told you silence is power, that walking away is strength, that saying nothing is the loudest message you can send. And for a time, it worked. Your quiet made her wonder. Your absence made her curious. Your stillness made them question what you were thinking. But here's the truth. No one talks about silence loses its power the moment it becomes predictable. You can't keep them guessing if they've stopped expecting you to speak. You can't control the narrative if you've left the room for too long. You can't remain mysterious if your silence turns into invisibility, because silence, when used without purpose, becomes emptiness. And emptiness doesn't attract respect. It invites assumption. The Stoics understood this paradox long before us. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." He wasn't talking about words, he was talking about presence. Because silence is not strength when it's a disguise for avoidance. It's not wisdom if it's rooted in fear. And it's not control if you've lost direction. Most men use silence as a shield. They go quiet not because they've mastered themselves, but because they've run out of words, or hope, or patience. And then they mistake retreat for power. But silence without intention is just surrender in disguise. Yes, silence can cut deep. It can create tension. It can make others reflect. But only when it's chosen, not when it's a byproduct of confusion or pain. True silence, the kind that carries weight, isn't passive. It's deliberate. It's the silence of a man who could speak, but doesn't need to. The illusion of silence is this: you think they're thinking about you, but most of the time, they're not. They've simply filled the empty space you left with their own stories. And once they do, you've lost control of the narrative. Your silence no longer commands respect. It just fades into the noise of their imagination. So ask yourself, what's your silence really saying right now? Is it communicating strength? Or confusion, discipline? Or detachment, mastery? Or avoidance? Because the Stoic man doesn't hide behind silence. He uses it like a scalpel. Sharp, controlled, purposeful. When he withdraws, it's to rebuild, not to escape. When he goes quiet, it's to observe, not to sulk. When he doesn't reply, it's not out of ego, it's out of clarity. He knows that silence is a tool, not a tomb. And here's what most men never realize: the longer you stay silent without direction, the more you condition others to forget your voice. At first, they miss you. Then they adapt. Then they stop wondering. And finally, your absence becomes comfortable not for you, but for them. And that's the danger. You wanted to make them reflect, but you taught them how to live without you. That's not power. That's passive self-erasure. So what's the way forward? It's to redefine silence, to strip away the illusion that quiet equals strength, and start understanding that intentional quiet is what carries weight. Silence is powerful only when it's directed, when it's paired with presence, action, and timing. That's what separates a man who disappears from a man who dominates the room without a word. The world misuses silence. People use it to manipulate, to guilt, to test. But the Stoic uses it to build. Every pause has purpose. Every word unsaid has meaning. Every absence serves his evolution. Because silence without purpose is just noise turned inward. But silence with purpose, that's art. That's control. That's power you can feel without ever raising your voice. So from now on, when you choose silence, ask yourself why. Is it to escape or to evolve? Is it to punish or to prepare? If your answer is to grow, then your silence will start to transform into strategy. You won't just disappear. You'll recalibrate. You'll rise higher, quieter, sharper. And when you finally decide to speak, the world will listen not because you demanded it, but because your silence earned it. That's the line between illusion and mastery. Most people go quiet to be missed, but the Stoic man goes quiet to be remembered. Silence doesn't end conversations. It rewrites them when used with intention. And this is where your transformation begins. Because the next step beyond silence is presence, the ability to shape the room without saying a word. Stay with me. Because now we're entering the level most men never reach, where silence is no longer absence, but a language of power. There comes a moment when silence, once your greatest weapon, begins to fail you. At first, it felt powerful, the calm detachment, the quiet control, the mysterious stillness. You thought your absence would echo in their mind. You thought they would feel the void and finally understand your worth. But days passed, then weeks, and suddenly the silence didn't feel strong anymore. It felt heavy, lonely, empty. That's when you realize something the world never tells you: silence, without purpose, eventually turns into noise inside your own head. The Stoics warned of this. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." Silence is not a response, it's a pause. And like all pauses, it must lead somewhere. If it doesn't, it dies. You see, silence was never meant to last forever. It's a reset button, not a permanent escape. A temporary withdrawal. Not a lifelong retreat, But too many men confuse stillness with stagnation. They stop talking, but they also stop growing. They disappear, but they never rebuild. They vanish, but they never return stronger. And when silence becomes indefinite, it doesn't make you powerful, it makes you forgettable. Because silence, by itself, doesn't define strength. Action does. It's what you do within that silence that creates meaning. Do you use that time to heal, to learn, to build, or do you sit there, scrolling through memories, mistaking stillness for discipline? That's when silence stops working. Not because silence is weak, but because you used it to hide instead of evolve. Many men go quiet, hoping the world will notice. But the truth is, the world moves on. And while you were silent, she learned to stop checking. Your absence stopped hurting. Your quiet became background noise. And that's when the power shifts. Because silence without direction gives control to the other side. They start deciding what your silence means. They assume. They rewrite the story. They cast you as distant, bitter, or broken, and without realizing it, you let them define your narrative. That's the danger of unstructured silence. It creates room for others to speak for you. But Stoic silence is different. Stoic silence is active. It's measured. It's purposeful. It's not about saying less, it's about becoming more. When a Stoic man goes quiet, he's not seeking validation through absence. He's constructing a new foundation of strength. He doesn't wait for others to miss him. He uses that time to sharpen his focus, align his emotions, and prepare his next move. Silence, then, becomes a weapon again, but this time forged with intention. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel, a fortress within your mind that no one can invade, not through guilt, not through manipulation, not through words. When you rebuild your silence from that place, calm, aware, grounded, you become untouchable. Your absence no longer screams pain. It radiates peace. It no longer begs to be noticed. It commands to be remembered. And that's the shift. When silence stops being emotional and starts being strategic, everything changes. Because silence can lose power only when you forget who you are inside it. If you use it to escape, it weakens you. If you use it to rebuild, it transforms you. Ask yourself, is my silence avoidance or evolution? Am I withdrawing to be missed or to rise? Am I trying to make them see my value, or am I reminding myself of it? These questions separate the lost from the Stoic, the broken from the reborn. You see, the Stoic man knows when to be silent, but he also knows when to act. He doesn't hide behind the excuse of mystery. He doesn't disappear for validation. He disappears for calibration. And when he returns, he doesn't return to prove anything. He returns to embody everything he's learned. That's when silence becomes alive again. When it's not about them anymore. When it's about you. When you can walk into a room after being unseen for weeks and they feel your presence without you saying a word. That's not silence. That's gravity. But gravity can't exist without mass. You have to build it in the dark, in the quiet, in the space between words. That's where real power grows. So the next time you decide to go silent, Remember this. Don't just disappear. Discipline yourself in the dark. Don't just withdraw. Work in the shadows. Don't just hold your tongue. Hold your vision. Because silence, without purpose, fadis, but silence, with intention, echoes forever. And when you learn to command that silence, you no longer need to prove your worth. You radiate it. That's when silence begins working again, not as a defense, but as a declaration: I am calm. I am certain. I am in control. And that energy, that quiet dominance, is what makes you unforgettable. Silence gets their attention, but presence makes them remember you. There's a difference between being quiet and being felt, between being unseen and being unforgettable. That difference is presence. You've met someone like that before. They walk into a room and everything changes. No loud words, no flashy clothes, no desperate need to be noticed. Yet, everyone feels something shift, like the air itself becomes heavier. That's presence. And it's not something you can fake. Presence is the energy of a man who knows who he is without needing to announce it. It's the calm in his posture, the steadiness in his eyes, the silence that carries meaning even before he speaks. You can't buy it. You can't copy it. You can only become it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Your presence is the reflection of your inner world. If your mind is chaotic, your energy will be scattered. If your heart is restless, your presence will feel uncertain. But when your thoughts are aligned, when you've mastered the storms within your very being commands attention. You see, presence is not about taking space, it's about owning it. There's a story in every movement of a Stoic man: how he stands, how he listens, how he breathes before he speaks. He doesn't rush. He doesn't chase the moment. He anchors it. And that's what people feel, that grounded energy, because presence is magnetic, not because it's loud, but because it's centered. Most men think power comes from dominance, from control, influence, attention. But true dominance comes from composure, the ability to hold your ground when everyone else is losing theirs. A man with presence doesn't react. He observes. He doesn't try to convince. He lets his energy do the convincing. When others raise their voice, he lowers his tone. When others panic, he breathes slower. When others fight for validation, he stands still. And that stillness unsettles people because it exposes their lack of control. That's why presence feels like power. It's not what you do that makes people respect you. It's what you don't need to do. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you walked into a room without saying a word and people still looked up? That's not arrogance. That's resonance. It's the vibration of discipline, self-trust, and quiet authority. The Stoics trained for this. They believed your outer calm should reflect your inner control. They didn't chase approval, they embodied virtue. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." He wasn't talking about minutes, he was talking about presence, being fully here, fully aware, fully intentional. That's the rarest thing in today's world, a man who's actually present. Most people are somewhere else. Their body is here, but their mind is everywhere. in regret, in anxiety, in distraction. That's why true presence stands out. It feels rare. It feels real. And when you cultivate that kind of presence, you don't have to demand respect. It arrives naturally. People can sense it. They feel it before they understand it. It's not just your posture, it's your frequency. Not just your words, it's the weight behind them. That's the paradox of presence. The less you try to impress, the more they remember you. Because presence is not performance. It's peace. And peace in a chaotic world is intimidating. A stoic man with true presence doesn't fill silence. He amplifies it. His calm makes others restless. His discipline exposes their weakness. And his restraint, that quiet restraint, makes them curious. They start to ask themselves, who is this man? Why does he feel so certain? Why does his silence feel louder than my words? That's when you know you've crossed the line from invisible to unforgettable. Your presence becomes a mirror. It forces others to see their own chaos. That's why the weak misunderstand you. They call you distant, cold, detached. But the strong, they recognize it instantly. Because presence recognizes presence. The moment you stop chasing noise, you start generating gravity. And people orbit around gravity. That's how a Stoic leads, not by demanding attention, but by embodying stability. So, how do you build it? You stop reacting. You start observing. You slow down your movements. You breathe through your emotions. You practice saying less but meaning more. Because presence isn't built in public. It's forged in solitude. In every decision you make, when no one is watching. In every battle you fight within your own mind. In every temptation you resist for the sake of your peace. Presence is the result of thousands of unseen victories. That's why when you finally walk into the room, you don't have to speak to prove your worth. Your silence speaks. Your discipline radiates. Your aura tells the story. And that story is simple. I don't need to chase. I am. When you reach that level, you become unshakable. Not because the world can't touch you, but because you've stopped needing its approval. That's the true dominance of presence. Not control over others, but command over yourself. Because when you master your energy, you master every room you walk into. And when your silence has weight, your presence becomes power. That's why the next level isn't louder, it's deeper. It's not about how many words you speak, but how many hearts your calm can move. This is the art of being unspoken, yet unforgettable. Presence commands respect, but action defines it. You can be silent. You can radiate confidence, but without deliberate action, all that presence eventually dissolves into potential unrealized. Silence is the pause. Presence is the tension. Action is the release. It's what separates the man who appears powerful from the man who is powerful. You see, in the world of men, talk is cheap, but so is stillness when it leads nowhere. Power doesn't come from being unseen. It comes from being undeniable. And the only thing that makes you undeniable is precision in motion. Stoicism was never about doing nothing. It was about doing the right thing at the right time, for the right reason. That's why Marcus Aurelius said, Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. To be one means to act, not recklessly, not emotionally, but with calm precision. Most men either act out of impulse or not at all. They either move too fast, chasing validation, or stay frozen, waiting for perfect timing that never comes. The Stoic man, however, moves like a blade slow to draw, but devastating when he does. When others rush to prove, he calculates. When others explode, he stays centered. When others react, he chooses, because his actions are never random. They are responses born from understanding, not emotion. That's the art of Stoic execution. Fewer moves, higher impact. Think about it. The most dangerous fighter isn't the one who throws 100 punches. It's the one who lands one perfectly timed. Your life works the same way. Every word, every choice, every silence should serve a purpose. Otherwise, you're just moving without meaning. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That's the blueprint. You define your values, then act from them. Not from ego, not from reaction, but from principle. When you act with precision, you no longer chase outcomes. You embody them. Imagine this. Someone disrespects you. Most men snap, they argue. Defend. Plead. Explain. But the Stoic man does something different. He looks, listens, and acts once with logic, not emotion. He doesn't argue for respect. He behaves in a way that makes disrespect impossible. That's precision. Or imagine in relationships when they expect you to chase, explain, overextend. You don't respond with anger or words. You respond with alignment. You pull your energy back. You focus on your mission. You act with clarity instead of reaction. And what happens? The balance shifts. Because your silence isn't passive anymore, it's directional. It moves things, even without movement. That's the paradox of precision. It looks effortless from the outside, but it's backed by absolute discipline on the inside. Seneca said it best, "Words that are devoid of truth are meaningless." In your life, actions without direction are the same, meaningless. When you start acting with purpose, you begin to experience something rare: momentum without chaos. You stop chasing temporary victories. You start building quiet empires. You stop explaining. You start demonstrating. And that's when you begin to understand real control. Because control isn't about domination, it's about direction. Every day, you're either reacting to life or directing it. There's no middle ground. Every decision, no matter how small, either reinforces your discipline or your weakness. You choose one with every response. That's why precision matters. It's not just about doing things, it's about doing them consciously. Even something as small as how you respond to a text, how you handle conflict, how you end a conversation. These moments shape how the world perceives your energy. Controlled, measured. Intentional action says, "I'm not trying to win your approval. I'm aligning with my purpose." And that's magnetic. Because people respect men who don't waste motion. They notice it. Even if they can't explain it, there's a rhythm to mastery, a calm, deliberate pace that separates you from the frantic noise around you. That's why a Stoic man always feels mysterious, not because he hides, but because he moves differently. He's not in a hurry. He's in control. Every man who masters his actions becomes a walking reminder of discipline. You can feel it in the way he stands, the way he looks at you, the way he speaks short, clear, final. There's power in that economy of effort, because when you stop scattering your energy, you start concentrating your influence. Action with precision also means knowing when not to act. Sometimes restraint is the most powerful move you can make. When you don't text back, when you don't explain, when you don't fight small battles, because every time you withhold reaction, you send a message, I move on my terms. That's why the disciplined man is dangerous. He's not predictable. You can't bait him with emotion. You can't control him with attention. You can't manipulate his pace. He moves when he chooses, and that timing makes every move matter. That's precision. That's power. When you master that balance between silence, presence, and action, you no longer chase respect. You command it through consistency. So remember this: words can inspire, silence can intrigue, but only action can define you. And every precise action builds your legacy. Every calm choice strengthens your authority. Every controlled response carves your character deeper into the world. Because in the end, it's not about how many times you spoke, it's about how clearly your life spoke for you. The Stoics knew this truth. You act not to prove, but to express who you already are. Your silence is your pause. Your presence is your foundation. But your precision, that's your signature. And when your signature is carved in discipline, you no longer need to shout your worth. The world feels it every time you move. That's the essence of power through precision. A man who doesn't waste motion doesn't waste his life. There's a rule most men never learn. The more you show up, the less you're valued. Because when something is always available, the world forgets how to appreciate it. That's why true power doesn't come from being seen all the time. It comes from being seen at the right time. Controlled visibility. That's the strategy. Not absence. Not constant présence. But deliberate, intentional appearance. You see, even silence loses meaning if it's endless. Even presence fades if it's constant. But when you master the art of showing up with purpose, your presence becomes rare and therefore respected. In today's world, people chase visibility. They post, they prove, they perform, they scream for attention from people who barely listen. But a Stoic man doesn't chase the spotlight. He creates gravity. He doesn't beg to be noticed. He appears when it matters most. That's why when he speaks, people listen. When he moves, people react. When he leaves, people feel it. Because his presence has rhythm, and rhythm creates anticipation. It's like music. Too much sound becomes noise. Too much silence becomes emptiness. But the right timing between both creates harmony. Controlled visibility is harmony in motion. It's learning to appear with precision and disappear with purpose. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are. Then adorn yourself accordingly." That's the foundation of this strategy. You first build your value in silence. Then you reveal it strategically. Let me show you how this works. A Stoic man doesn't attend every argument, every debate, every invitation. He chooses carefully where to invest his presence, because every moment he shows up, he knows he's communicating something about his time, his focus, his discipline. When you're always visible, people start expecting you. When they expect you, they stop valuing you. But when you reappear at the right time with clarity, purpose, and calm, you reset the dynamic. You remind them that your attention isn't free. It's earned. That's why controlled visibility is magnetic. It creates curiosity. It builds respect. It teaches others, consciously or not, that your presence is a privilege, not a given. People are wired to chase what's scarce, and when your presence becomes selective, your value multiplies. Let's make this real. Imagine, in relationships, you used to text first. Explain everything. Fill the silence. Now, you step back. You let distance speak for you. Then, one day, you reappear calm, composed, focused, not to chase, but to contribute. And that subtle shift, that unpredictability, creates intrigue. You're no longer the one reaching. You've become the one observed. Or in your career, instead of attending every meeting or voicing every opinion, you learn to choose your moments. When you do speak, you bring clarity. When you act, it's deliberate. People begin to associate your presence with progress, your words with weight. That's controlled visibility. And here's the key. Controlled visibility isn't about withdrawal, it's about strategy. Absence for the sake of attention is manipulation, but absence for the sake of focus is mastery. Because when you pull away to rebuild, to sharpen your edge, to work in silence, your eventual reappearance carries the energy of transformation. They can feel the difference. Your aura changes. Your eyes hold new calm. Your posture speaks discipline. And when you return, it doesn't even matter what you say. The silence that shaped you already said enough. Marcus Aurelius said, "Let your actions be ruled by principles." Controlled visibility is that principle in action. You show up only when your presence aligns with your purpose. You don't speak to fill space. You speak to deliver clarity. You don't act to prove. You act to create movement. You don't appear to please. You appear to influence. That's the mindset shift. Stop showing up everywhere. For everyone. Start showing up intentionally for what actually matters. Because every time you appear without purpose, you dilute your power. And every time you disappear with intention, you multiply it. Controlled visibility teaches patience. It trains your ego to sit quietly while your value grows in silence. And when the moment comes, you emerge not to be seen, but to be felt. That's the difference between a man who exists and a man who imprints. Controlled visibility doesn't mean you vanish completely. It means you master timing. You let mystery and presence dance together. You become unpredictable, not for attention, but for effect. Because predictability kills respect. When people can't anticipate your next move, they pay attention. And in that space between uncertainty and admiration, your influence grows. Think of great leaders, thinkers, warriors. They all understood this rhythm. They weren't always visible. They appeared when it mattered, spoke when it counted, and vanished when the world got too loud. That's why their legacy lasts. Controlled visibility is not about being everywhere. It's about being remembered everywhere you've been. So from now on, stop trying to prove your worth through constant presence. Let your silence mature into strategy. Let your absence build anticipation. Let your reappearance carry weight. Because when you master this rhythm, you'll realize something profound. You don't need to be seen to be respected. You just need to be felt. That's the power of controlled visibility. The art of appearing not to impress, but to influence. When your timing is right, your silence becomes anticipation. Your presence becomes impact. And your absence becomes a legend. Silence, presence, action, visibility. They are all pieces of the same puzzle, but there's one law that makes them come alive, the law of contrast. Because nothing shines without its shadow, and no presence is powerful without absence. Think about it. You don't notice the sunrise if you've never known darkness. You don't appreciate peace until you've faced chaos. And you don't understand your own strength until life tests it. That's the law of contrast, the invisible force that gives meaning to everything you do. It's the reason your silence hits harder after noise. It's why your presence feels magnetic after absence. And it's why your actions have weight only when they're rare. The Stoics understood this long before psychology gave it a name. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb men, but their judgments about these things." In other words, nothing has power on its own. Meaning is born from contrast. The sweet exists because of the bitter. Respect exists because of boundaries. And power exists because of restraint. The problem with most men today, they have no contrast. They're always talking, always showing up, always proving until their energy becomes background noise. If you're always visible, you're no longer valuable. If you're always speaking, your words lose meaning. If you're always chasing, you erase the mystery that made you magnetic in the first place. Contrast is the art of knowing when to pull back and when to strike. It's a psychological rhythm: appear, disappear, reappear, each move amplifying the one before it. Like a heartbeat, silence, pulse, silence, pulse. That's the rhythm of influence. You see, the mind is wired to notice change. People stop seeing what's always in front of them. But when something shifts, when energy disappears and then returns, it captures attention again. That's why controlled visibility works. It's not about absence for ego. It's about contrast for effect. Let's make this real. Imagine a man who's always available, always texting, always explaining, always there. Eventually, his presence loses its value. Now imagine that same man steps back. He grows in silence. He builds. He reappears weeks later, not to chase, but to lead. He speaks calmly. He acts decisively. Suddenly, his presence feels different. Why? Because the silence before it created contrast. Contrast makes people feel your growth. It forces them to reevaluate your value. And here's the secret. You don't have to say you've changed. The absence says it for you. Your stillness makes them curious. Your return makes them alert. Your composure makes them respect you. That's the invisible power of contrast. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." He wasn't just talking about adversity, he was describing this very principle. Obstacles, pauses, setbacks, they create contrast. They sharpen your direction. They make your next move matter. Because if everything flowed easily, nothing would carry weight. Contrast creates meaning. Meaning creates memory. And memory creates legacy. When you learn to use contrast consciously, you stop trying to impress. You start orchestrating perception. You become the man who doesn't need to be seen all the time, because the impact of your absence keeps you alive in their thoughts. And when you finally reappear, you don't even have to explain. They feel it. That's how the Stoic commands attention, not by asking for it, but by designing it. Every silence you create, every calculated move, every unpredictable shift becomes part of your symphony. Because contrast is music. A symphony isn't all sound. It's the pauses between notes that give it soul. The space between action and inaction that makes each move unforgettable. In relationships, contrast keeps desire alive. In leadership, it keeps respect intact. In life, it keeps your energy sacred. Let's go deeper. The law of contrast doesn't just apply to how others see you, it applies to how you see yourself. You can't know strength without struggle. You can't appreciate peace without noise. You can't value freedom without boundaries. And every season of silence you go through is building the gravity of your next emergence. So the next time life forces you into isolation, don't resist it. Use it. Silence isn't punishment, it's preparation. You're not being ignored, you're being refined. Because contrast is shaping you, turning your stillness into steel. The Stoics didn't fear quiet seasons. They understood that what looks like retreat is often the beginning of revelation. When the world doesn't see you, that's when you grow roots. When you stop chasing, that's when you start becoming. And when you return, the world feels the difference. Even if they can't explain it, that's the hidden genius of contrast. It turns consistency into power by weaving in the unexpected. Predictability is the death of respect. But measured unpredictability, that's the birth of fascination. You don't need chaos to be mysterious. You just need discipline in your timing. Disappear when they expect you to speak. Reappear when they've stopped expecting. Let absence build curiosity. Let presence deliver impact. That's contrast. That's control. Because when your timing becomes deliberate, your influence becomes inevitable. Every silence will amplify your next word. Every disappearance will magnify your next move. Every pause will prepare the stage for your next impact. You'll start to notice it everywhere, the shift in how people speak to you, how they look at you, how they wait for your response. Not because you said anything, but because you understood timing. And timing is everything. It's the secret behind every great speech, every powerful leader, every unshakable man. He doesn't flood the world with his energy. He releases it in doses measured, intentional, unforgettable. That's how legends are made, not through noise, but through the contrast between silence and impact. So let me ask you, are you moving with contrast, or are you drowning your power in constant presence?